Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Riot have released their dev video as of a couple of days ago, which I have to give them major props for doing this constantly and repeatedly to keep us abreast of what's going on. But the major part of this newest dev update was actually an update on League of Legends lore. Now, longtime viewers of the channel know that I am the lore's staunchest defender with regards to League of Legends canon, and I've been very disappointed by Riot over the last year or so. It feels like there hasn't been any lore at all that Riot have made for an extended period of time, and it's been very disappointing for me to see. I really enjoy the League of Legends canon, and the fact that Riot have just sort of stopped doing it is very disappointing. This, coupled with the announcement that color stories were no longer going to be happening, was even worse for me. But the sweeping update and announcement that happened in the dev update video announced that now everything going forward is going to be canon. Season start cinematics are going to be canon, champion release trailers are going to be canon, any Riot Forge games or sort of other media released is also going to be canonical, and this was all capped off with the biggest announcement potentially, that Arcane is now canon. Now, this is something that I actually made a video about a couple of years ago when Arcane was first running. I'll have that linked in the description if you want to take a look at it. And for a lot of you who watched that video, you may think that I'm extremely happy with this decision. But the more I think about it, the more I actually don't like this. And I wanted to clarify a little bit what I was, sort of the thrust of that first video that I made. Now, when I made the video where I say Arcane needed to be canon, for the most part, I was complaining about the problems that I'd seen Riot approaching with their regards to canonicity. To me, it felt like anytime Riot did any degree of storytelling, the first thing that they would do is say, you know, start doing storytelling. People would say, that doesn't match up with canon, that doesn't make any sense, how does that line up? And Riot's immediate response was, oh, well, don't worry, it's not canon. And this is just kind of disappointing then, right? You're trying to get excited for a new story or something else canonical happening in the universe, and at the end of the day, Riot are just waving their hand and saying, actually, it's not canon, don't worry about it, and it leads to very inconsistent storytelling. It really felt like Riot weren't trying to remotely know their own lore, they just wanted to be able to tell their own stories, and the second the community, who knows their lore better than they do, say, hey, but that doesn't make any sense, they just wave their hands and get rid of it. It felt very comic book in terms of the storytelling, right, with all sorts of AUs and different things happening, and it just wasn't particularly interesting in my personal opinion. I really am not happy with the way comic book storytelling kind of works, where you have a million different AUs and alternate universes and reimaginings of characters and different things happening, right, as opposed to a single canon where you can tell a character's story from start to finish. The fact that there are constant reboots just really don't work with me, and it felt like Riot were going in a very similar direction with their storytelling, especially in the wake of Arcane, their biggest media property yet, that they're waving their hand and saying, oh, actually, it's not canon, because they sort of went against the lore in every way they possibly could have. And while I understand the reason that Riot did it, right, they wanted their writers to have full creative freedom with Arcane to tell the best story that they could have, I felt like it was just sort of short-sighted. It was sort of being disrespectful to what they had written before, which I felt was quite good. And that was sort of the reason why that video got made as a whole. The fact that Arcane has become canon, however, I think is not necessarily an advantage over existing League of Legends lore. There are some advantages to this. I think character-wise, there are some characters in League of Legends that are much better in their Arcane incarnations than in their League of Legends incarnations. Most notably, the two main protagonists, I guess I would say, of Arcane in Vi and Jinx. Vi started life as sort of a, oh, I'm a girl, but I'm not a girly girl like those other girls. Also, big fan of police brutality. Love police brutality, right? Like, that kind of character has not aged particularly well, shall we say. And I think that her incarnation in Arcane is so much better as sort of this conflicted character who's torn between the two cities, who wants to do right by Zaun, but who's working with Piltover. Just a lot of very interesting things have gone into that character, and I think that that replacement is fine. Jinx is in a similar boat. In League of Legends, she's just sort of, haha, look at me, I'm so crazy and quirky and cool, and I like destruction and stuff. And there's no depth to it, right? Jinx was the kind of character that they created, and they never bothered to think beyond the first 5 minutes that people would have with Jinx. And I feel like with the context of Arcane, Jinx becomes a very interesting character, that we sort of understand the reasons for why she's a little crazy, you know, the years of being gaslit by Silco and possible undiagnosed mental illness and the quote-unquote betrayal from her sister, right? There's a lot of things that go into Jinx's character now, so that, and again, I think that this is then a better character overall. But those two are the exceptions rather than the norm. I think that there are a lot of characters that are being replaced in worse ways, right? When gaining stories that I don't think are as compelling as their current League of Legends stories. Echo, for example, in League of Legends, still has his parents both alive. They work long hours in Zaun's factories in order to fund a better life for their son. They actually bought him a entry into the Piltover Academy of Techmetallurgy so he can study because they know how smart he is and they want the best for him. But Echo doesn't want to go to the Academy of Techmetallurgy because he's all on board with the technological ingenuity and superiority of Zaun versus Piltover. And that sort of juxtaposition, that sort of tension in the character, I think is extremely interesting and unique, and we threw it all away because we wanted to do Arcane's version of Echo instead, who I don't think is a bad character per se, but I don't necessarily think is particularly interesting. I just feel like Riot kind of threw away some of the interest that Echo had in League of Legends in favor of his Arcane version, which isn't necessarily the worst, but I do feel like there's a lot of unexplored interest in terms of Echo in League of Legends that we're now no longer going to get to explore. Probably the worst example of this is Victor. I think Victor's character in Arcane was done so dirty. Victor doesn't do anything in Arcane at all. He is a victim of circumstances at every turn. He basically doesn't make any decisions on his own. When he does, it immediately backfires in his face. He's not even doing the thing where he's the one replacing his body willingly with superior mechanical components. He's just having it done to him through magical BS, and he even regrets it himself. Compare and contrast this to the League of Legends version of Victor, who I think is extremely interesting, who's from Zaun, who managed to get into the Academy of Techmetallurgy in Piltover, which is extremely difficult for a Zaunite to do, who was even able to match wits with the sort of poster boy of the Piltover Academy in Jace. They bickered all the time, but they were able to match each other in terms of their intelligence. But Victor had this sort of streak of amorality, which then cast Jace in a very interesting light. Yes, Jace was totally willing to use his privilege, shall we say, to get Victor kicked out. Yes, Jace is bullheaded and stubborn and thinks himself better than everybody else. But Jace also has morality and is willing to say, hey, Victor, you can't just mind control human beings if you think it's better for them. That's not right. And Victor says, I don't understand. And Victor's then, like, progression into the Machine Herald and this idea of the glorious evolution just is extremely interesting and cool, and it's a very fun character. And Riot are throwing all that in the garbage because, well, Arcane has to be canon, and we like this other version of Victor better, even though he's worse in, like, every single way. Now, again, we haven't gotten to Season 2 yet. Maybe Riot salvage it, but I am just so doubtful of this that I can't see it possibly happening. Arcane also has a lot of issues with the cosmology of Runeterra. Even if Riot are willing to do lots of rewriting to make everything line up, they got Piltover and Zaun wrong, for example. Piltover and Zaun are a vertical city. Zaun is literally underneath Piltover, hence why it's called the Undercity. In Arcane, Zaun is a, like, slum borough across the river from Piltover. That's it. That's too normal. That's super basic. And that sort of then... Right, why is it called the Undercity when we literally see characters going across a bridge to get to the other side, right? Like, why is it an Undercity if that's the case? They completely mess that up. The Hex Gates are something that I think have a lot of implications storytelling-wise for the entirety of Runeterra, but they were thrown into Arcane without thinking because, well, we want to do something cool and show how cool of an inventor Jace is, so Hex Gates exist now, and we're not going to deal with their implications or ramifications at all. I don't think that's a particularly good idea. I really feel like Riot should have paid more attention to that before they put it in, or at least before they decided to make it officially canon. But I think most importantly, my problem with Arcane replacing the existing League of Legends canon is that it would be fine if the existing League of Legends canon sucked, right? If we were still in 2012 and the lore just generally was written to be as shallow as possible and as boring and uninteresting as it possibly could be, I'd be totally on board with replacing with Arcane, right? Arcane actually has some degree of thought and interest in character development and world building, that it's all integrated, and as a result, that would be much better for me. But that's not the world we live in. And I think Piltover and Zaun have a very interesting internal story going that Riot are no longer going to get to tell. Now, admittedly, I don't think Riot necessarily intended for it to be a story, but of course I'm talking about the Brackern and the invention of Hextech, right? Where Camille's family finds the Brackern buried in Shurima, they pull out their hex crystals, they bring them back to Piltover. The professors and Piltover can't figure out how to use them, so they give them to their star pupil Jace, who, with the help of Victor, is able to unlock the secrets of using hex crystals, which leads to the invention of Hextech, which leads to people actively mining Skarner's people for more hex crystals, which eventually Skarner wakes up. He destroys the Piltover mining operation. No longer can they mine hex crystals, so instead they go to making artificial hex crystals, the process by which actually leads leads to the byproducts lead to the creation of the Zaun Grey, which is a major facet of Zaun's sort of cosmology and world building. And then you have interesting character developments in terms of Seraphine, who knows enough to know that not everything is right with Hextech, but who doesn't know exactly what's going on with that, which leads to all sorts of interesting opportunities for emergent storytelling. Seraphine, for example, trying to pursue the secret behind the Hex Crystals and running afoul of Camille, who's trying to preserve her family's secrets and because it's giving them so much power. What happens when Skarner shows up in Piltover and basically says, give me back my people? What happens when Jace and Victor find out that they are inadvertently responsible for the almost genocide of an entire race? There's all sorts of interesting opportunities in room for storytelling and character growth and just all sorts of things that you could have done with this setup, and it's being thrown away because we like Arcane better. Again, I don't think Arcane is a bad story. I really, really enjoy it, but it is not supplanting nothing. It is supplanting a story that I think is extremely interesting and unique, and Riot have just made the decision unilaterally to get rid of everything else in favor of Arcane. I think this is a big mistake. I really think that this was not something that Riot should have been doing. I really think that they're just throwing out the baby with the bathwater here, all in the name of, hey, we're finally trying to make everything canon. I don't hate the approach. I think that Riot trying to take a more unified approach to the lore going forward is going to address that issue I had, the comic book-ism of League of Legends. I really think that that's a good thing going forward, but it just, to me, is not the way I would have done things with regards to Arcane. But you guys left to know what you think of this down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you think Arcane is better than League of Legends lore, please let me know why. If you aren't familiar with League of Legends lore, go read it. I urge you, go check out what's available on Universe and make your own decision as to whether or not you think that Arcane is better or worse. But let me know all that down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.